The Obama administration was obviously lying about that. What if the emails showed that she really was lying about the fact that Clinton Foundation didn't have influence on State Department policy? That would be a really big whopper of a lie.
John Fund, I have to leave it there. Nice
Sure.
to talk.
Is suspected of blowing himself up at that wedding that killed at least 8 people and wounded at least 60 other guests. Ambulances are continuing to race to that scene. The wedding taking place in a city near the border with Syria, just 40 miles away. Southern Turkey, as you may know, has been hit with various terrorist attacks in the past few months. We will have more information on this. Another horrendous and devastating story, especially sad because it was a wedding, obviously a target of terrorists, as we get more information.
Comes amid the president taking criticism for not cutting his trip short in order to visit the flood-ravaged state of Louisiana. Kevin Corke is traveling with the president and joins us live from Martha's Vineyard in Massachusetts.
Motions. You hear people say, well, I guess better late than never, and then others say, look, what took the guy so long? Those seem to be the most common reactions to the White House's announcement that indeed the president on Tuesday will make his way to Louisiana to firsthand survey the devastation of the historic and deadly flooding that frankly overwhelmed so many communities in that beautiful state. Now, the White House will tell you, being mindful of the additional strain that a presidential visit would place on first responders, for example, they wanted to wait until the governor of the state extended an invitation. He did, and so now the president will make his way there on Tuesday. White House Press Secretary Josh Earnest weighing in on it. He has a statement I want to share with the folks at home. It reads in part that the president is eager to tell the people of Louisiana that this is a really dicey circumstance for a president in terms of optics, especially when they're on vacation.
Milwaukee's burning and Louisiana's flooding, and he's speaking at a $34,000 a plate fundraiser for Hillary Clinton. So there's at a certain point the optics can be really bad.
Okay, now, let's be clear here. The president has cut short trips before. You may remember after the tragic shooting, I think aptly so, he made his way up to New Jersey pretty quickly after Sandy without all the fanfare about, well, we didn't want to overwhelm first responders. And so it sort of cuts both ways politically. But the bottom line, Arthel, is the people need to hear from the president, and indeed they will on Tuesday. Arthel?
Allies, and that meant a close call between U.S. forces and the Syrian military. The Syrian Air Force attacked Hasaka, a city in the northeast part of that country, bombing the U.S.-backed Kurds there. Apparently, there were some U.S. Special Operation Forces acting as advisors to the Kurdish rebels nearby when the Syrian airstrikes began. You know, it marks the closest time that U.S. forces have come to being attacked by Syrian forces. Retired U.S. Air Force Lieutenant General Richard Newton joins us. He's a former Assistant Vice Chief of Staff. General, good to see you as always. This is
good to be with you, Eric.
This is so troubling because basically what will happen if the Syrian military kills some of our special ops?
Well, this is troubling. It's a sign of another major escalation of Assad and the pro-Syrian government forces. Certainly, it does potentially put American special operators and others in harm's way. It's been a bad week for certainly our position in Syria and our fight against ISIS. If you recall, on Tuesday, Russian bombers launched strikes out of Iran into Syria, and so that's the first time, by the way, Iran has permitted a foreign country to operate strikes outside of its territory.
And Russia's launching cruise missiles too.
That's correct. They launched cruise missiles, as you recall, a couple months or so ago. So the escalation, frankly, is along a path that I think is very troubling for the Obama administration. Again, on the 5th-year anniversary of President Obama trying to compel Assad to step aside, and 5 years later, we're still dealing with this in an escalatory manner.
You've been in the cockpit of the bombers. What happens? Apparently, these are Su-24s, like a Soviet or Russian-built bombers that are flown by the Syrian Air Force. Our guys apparently radioed to the Syrians at some point, and they didn't get a reply. So how do you wave them off? We scrambled. Walk us through being in the cockpit in that seat as you have been when something like this happens.
You bet. Well, first off, Ready to Get Air campaign on a day-to-day basis is a very complex, effort. I've actually flown with the Russian Air Force, and I can tell you that, they're equipped with, a number of capabilities that, do have certain threats against the United States and our capabilities and so forth. But again, adding the complexity of Russia launching sorties out of Iran into an already very busy and potentially dangerous air campaign is difficult. And so you've got to have the right command and control. You've got to be on the same frequencies. You've got to have areas where you actually are able to, be able to avoid other aircraft that are in the area. And having, the Russians, and in this case the Syrians now up in the northeast part of Syria, flying strike sorties is extraordinary.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but what about the capability of the Syrians? We sent them a message saying, this is our reply: the United States aircraft would defend troops on the ground if threatened. And we came pretty close to being threatened, so how would we defend our troops, the special ops, on the ground? We'd shoot down the Syrians?
We have air-to-air capability over there and so forth. But can you imagine, today's headline is the fact that Assad has struck targets that are friendly to the United States in the fight against ISIS. Can you imagine if the headline tomorrow would be that the United States says, if you fly, you die. In other words, we will conduct strikes against and ground and destroy the Syrian Air Force if you continue to strike pro-U.S., anti-ISIS forces
and why
that are
haven't
friendly
we
to the
done
United
that?
States.
Why haven't we done that? I think they've been barrel bombing them. We haven't bombed their runways, like some have suggested we should have done, years ago.
I'd agree with you, and again, let's throw politics in here. If you've got a Donald Trump-led effort here, he's promised to take the gloves off. I think it's now, again, 5 years where we're putting up with this. And I think it's time that we really seriously reconsider what our policy has been and what the rules of engagement have been, that we go after, Assad's forces, we go after those who are, fighting, ISIS and so forth. It's time to take the gloves off. And this is another example, another escalation.
Lieutenant General, sorry to interrupt you, but finally we have like 30 seconds left. What would you have done? Look, Ronald Reagan, 1981, Gulf of Sidra, remember that? Two Su-22s from the Libyan Air Force went up and they met two F-14 Tomcats made by Grumman and Long Island. And they didn't,
exactly,
they went by.
Right. Think of Ronald Reagan back in 1984, say, on the heels of the Iranian hostages and the takeover and so forth. He would not have put up with this, and I don't think the United States should put up with this. Our enemies need to fear us, Eric, and our allies and our partners, such as the Kurds, need to be able to rely on us if we're going to defeat this ISIS and we're going to defeat the tyranny and the terrorism that is overtaking this part of the world. It's just, to me, I think I would take the gloves off. I would re-examine our rules of engagement. I would give our military commanders the right authorities and the right flexibility to go after and take on our enemies in order to defeat them. Otherwise, you and I are going to be talking about this 5-10 years from now.
Well, it is such a tremendously horrendous, overwhelming human catastrophe that has been going on for the past 5 years, and you can point fingers, at the UN. They keep on talking about it, and nothing has happened yet so far, and sadly it continues. Lieutenant General Richard Newton, always good to see you. Thank you for your insight, as always.
Good to see you, Eric.